Don't touch that. Step away from the vehicle.
Hands are up, sir. I have done nothing wrong.
I'll decide that.
My identification is inside my car. I need to reach into the vehicle to get it.
Always got something to say.
I am asking you to let me show you who I am.
Don't reach for anything.
You are going to regret this.
The first thing was Grimshaw's voice. Sharp, certain, the voice of a man who had already resolved the situation before stepping out of his cruiser. He was telling someone not to touch that. He was telling someone to step away from the vehicle. He was not explaining why. He had not explained why. He had pulled into the Stripes station off the Seguin exit at 9:47 on a Tuesday night, and from the moment his headlights swept across the forecourt, his eyes had found the holster on the hip of the man at pump 4 and had not moved from it. Moses Simeon's hands were already up. Both of them, palms out, fingers spread. He had not been asked. He raised them the moment the cruiser rolled in hard because he had spent 12 years in environments where the wrong movement carried consequences that could not be undone, and he understood, without needing to be told, what kind of stop this was. Grimshaw told him to step away from the vehicle. Moses stepped back, hands still visible. Grimshaw told him to place his hands on the hood. Moses moved to comply. Grimshaw told him not to reach. Moses stated he was placing his hands on the hood, that he was not reaching for his weapon. He named the movement before he made it, in a voice that carried no aggression, only precision. It was the voice of a man who had learned, long before that night, that clarity was the only protection available to him in certain encounters. Grimshaw deployed the taser. The voltage dropped Moses Simeon where he stood. His body did not fall. It seized, then collapsed. The involuntary shutdown of a man whose posture had been military straight for 12 years. He hit the concrete at pump 4. His weapon had not moved. His hands were open when he landed. Grimshaw reached for his radio. If you are ready to see institutional racism taken down, like this video and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now, because you won't want to miss tomorrow's story of cops messing with the wrong people and finding out. Let me know if you enjoyed the story. Let's continue. There is something that you need to understand about the man on that forecourt. Moses Simeon was 41 years old, third-generation military. His grandfather had served. His father had served. Moses had enlisted at 19 and had not stopped. He was stationed at Fort Cavazos in Killeen, 90 miles from the Stripes station, and had spent the last 4 years as a senior operations officer coordinating the kind of logistics where a single miscalculation had consequences measured not in cost overruns but in lives. His commanding officer's last written review used the phrase, operates with the kind of precision that makes him both easy to trust and difficult to replace. He was not a man who made careless movements. He had driven to San Antonio that morning for a training coordination meeting that ran long. The tank had been low since he merged back onto I-10. He pulled off at the Seguin exit because the gauge had been sitting on empty for 11 miles, and Moses Simeon was not a man who ignored instruments. His sidearm was holstered on his right hip. Legal carry. Texas is an open carry state. Active personnel in transit carry openly. It is regulation, not preference. He had checked the holster when he got in the car that morning the same way he checked the mirrors, once, without ceremony. He had not touched it since. The stop, from the moment Grimshaw's cruiser entered the lot, had lasted 4 minutes and 19 seconds. Moses had identified himself immediately. He had stated his rank. He had named his station. He had told Grimshaw the holster was legal carry, and asked, in a level voice, the reason for the contact. Grimshaw had not answered the question. He had told Moses to step away from the vehicle. Moses stepped back. Grimshaw told him to place his hands on the hood. Moses moved toward the hood. Grimshaw told him not to reach. Moses stated he was following the instruction to place his hands on the hood. Grimshaw told him to stop moving. A man cannot simultaneously place his hands on a hood and not move. Moses understood this. He had been in environments where contradictory commands were not oversights, they were architecture. The gap between what was being said and what was being wanted was exactly where people got hurt. He did what his training had prepared him to do. He slowed down. He spoke clearly. He announced every movement before he made it. He stated that he was placing his right hand on the hood of the vehicle. He stated that he was not reaching for his weapon. Grimshaw fired. Grimshaw stood over Moses on the forecourt of the Stripes station and keyed his radio. His voice was even. He reported a subject down. He reported that the subject had failed to comply with repeated lawful commands. He reported that the taser had been deployed and the suspect secured without further incident. The entire radio call took 11 seconds. He holstered the taser while delivering it. One detail. Small, unremarked upon in the moment. Grimshaw's body camera had been running since his cruiser entered the lot. He had not deactivated it. The footage existed from the first sweep of the headlights across the forecourt to the moment the radio crackled back with acknowledgement. Everything in between was on tape. What that tape showed is the reason this case did not end with a 14-word report. Reuben Grimshaw had a habit. It was not a secret, not entirely. 2 deputies in the Guadalupe County Sheriff's Department had noted it informally, and one had committed it to a departmental memo. The memo had been reviewed and filed without response. The habit was this: Grimshaw deactivated his body camera at points of contact he assessed as routine. He had done it before. The memo documented 3 specific instances. No formal action had followed any of them. On the night of the Stripe station, he had not deactivated it. This requires explanation, because the reason matters. Grimshaw had not left the camera running out of compliance or procedural caution. He had left it running because in the first 11 seconds of that stop, from the moment he clocked the holster to the moment he stepped out of the cruiser, he had assessed the situation as one he could justify in writing. He believed the footage would show a subject who failed to comply, a holster that constituted a credible threat, a taser deployment that any reasonable officer would have made. He was correct that the footage would become central to the case. He was wrong about what it would show. Terrence was 24 years old, working the closing shift at the Stripe station. He had stepped outside to clear a blocked pump nozzle when Grimshaw's cruiser rolled in hard. He watched the stop unfold without moving. He understood, without being told, that what he was watching was not routine. He recorded 43 seconds on his phone. The footage was shaky at the edges and clear in the center. Moses's hands, both of them, visible on the hood of the vehicle at the moment the taser fired. The sound of the deployment. The fall. Terrence did not post it. He sent it that same night to a cousin who worked in the Bazar County Public Defender's office with a message asking what he was supposed to do with it. By the following morning it had reached an attorney. 2 recordings now existed, Grimshaw's body camera and Terrence's phone. Same forecourt, same 43 seconds. Moses Simeon's hands in the same position from 2 different angles at the same moment. Grimshaw's report had used 14 words to describe those 43 seconds. Subject failed to comply with repeated lawful commands. Taser deployed. Suspect secured without further incident. The body camera showed something different. It showed the contradictory commands. It showed Moses narrating his own compliance. It showed the 2.3-second window between Moses's last spoken word and the taser deployment, a window in which Moses had not moved, had not reached, had not done anything except stand at a gas station with a legally holstered weapon and follow instructions that could not simultaneously be followed. That 2.3-second window would later be paused on a courtroom screen in front of a jury. The prosecutor would ask one question: what does compliance look like, if not this? If Grimshaw had deactivated that body camera the way he had done 3 times before, his 14-word report would have been the only version of that night on record. Moses Simeon would have had no counter. Do you think this case reaches a verdict without that footage? Drop yes or no in the comments. And share this with someone who still thinks documentation doesn't matter. Civil discovery pulled the full record. 6 prior complaints against Grimshaw across 9 years as Guadalupe County Sheriff, 2 for excessive force, 3 described by subordinate officers in their own written accounts as racially selective and targeting. All 6 had been processed through internal review. None had been escalated beyond a supervisory notation. A county legal memo from 2 years prior had flagged Grimshaw's use of force rate as statistically anomalous against both state averages and the department's own data from the preceding year. The memo had been filed. No response had been documented. The record had not been hidden. It had simply never been assembled. Each complaint had moved through the same channel and arrived at the same place: a closed file, a notation, a return to duty. The pattern was available to anyone who had looked at 9 years at once rather than one incident at a time. Nobody had looked. Then the message thread. A private group of 5, Grimshaw among them. The language was careful, deniable, not explicit. References to certain calls requiring a firmer approach. An internal term, code yellow. No department policy defined it. It appeared in Grimshaw's incident notes consistently in connection with stops involving black motorists. Every officer in the thread understood what it meant. The phrase "failed to comply" had appeared in Grimshaw's filed reports 11 times in 4 years. All 11 reviewed internally, none resulting in formal action. 11 times, 14 words. 11 times, a closed file. Moses Simeon had not been taken home from the Stripes station that night. He had been taken to a hospital in Seguin. During the taser deployment, his heart had entered an irregular rhythm, a documented physiological response to high-voltage electrical discharge in subjects with no prior cardiac history. He spent 6 hours in observation. A cardiologist spoke to him before discharge. He called his wife from that hospital bed at 1 a.m. He told her he was fine. He told her he would be home by morning. He did not tell her what the cardiologist had said. He decided to wait to sit across from her at the kitchen table, in daylight, where she could hear it in person. That was the kind of decision Moses Simeon made. Grimshaw's report did not mention the hospital. It did not mention Seguin, or the 6 hours, or the cardiac event. It described the suspect as secured without further incident. The civil rights firm in Austin, when they later reviewed the filing, described the gap between those 14 words and those 6 hours as the most expensive sentence Guadalupe County had ever allowed a sheriff to write. The courtroom was full before the building opened. People stood along the back wall. The overflow room held a live feed on a mounted screen, and the crowd in it was quiet, the particular quiet of people who understand the weight of what is being decided and have no interest in performance. Grimshaw sat at the defense table. No uniform, no county seal, no 9 years of institutional authority making his word the last word. He was a 52-year-old man in a Navy suit waiting for a jury to return with what his certainty had cost him. Moses Simeon entered in his service uniform. His attorney had neither suggested it nor discouraged it. Moses had made the decision that morning without consultation, without strategy as a statement of fact about who he was. He took his seat without looking at Grimshaw. He was still. The defense argued what it had: split-second judgment, threat perception. It argued that Moses's verbal narration, the deliberate announcement of every movement before it was made, had created an unpredictable pattern that a reasonable officer could have read as non-compliance. That a holster on the hip of a man who kept talking constituted credible danger. The prosecution played 2 recordings and said very little else. Grimshaw's body camera, in full. The lot. The commands. Moses's hands on the hood. The contradictory instructions. The 2.3-second window. The taser. The fall. The 11-second radio call in a voice without hesitation. Terrence's phone. The same 43 seconds from across the lot. Moses's hands visible. The sound. The same fall from a different angle. The prosecution did not use the word racist in its closing. It used the word pattern. It placed Grimshaw's 11 use of force reports on the projected screen. It placed the 6 complaints beside them. It placed the code yellow thread. It asked the jury to look at what the county had known and when it had known it and what the county had chosen to do each time. It asked them to consider what a man puts in a report when he believes his own camera has already confirmed his version of events. And it asked them what it meant when the camera said something different. Moses delivered his victim impact statement standing. He described the 6 hours in Seguin. He described what a cardiologist tells a 41-year-old man about what high-voltage electrical discharge does to a heart under stress. He described driving home the next morning and sitting at the kitchen table and telling his wife, in daylight, what he had not been able to say from a hospital bed. He described returning to Fort Cavazos. A corporal approached him, 23 years old, from Georgia, 2 years into his first posting. The corporal had seen the story circulating and asked, with the directness of someone who had not yet learned to soften questions, whether it was real, whether it had actually happened to a major. Moses told him yes. The corporal was quiet. Then he asked what Moses said had taken him 6 months to answer properly. What was the point of doing everything right? Moses had turned that question over during physical therapy, during cardiology follow-ups, during depositions. He had turned it over on the drive back from San Antonio the night of the Stripe stop, before the cruiser ever entered the lot. He told the courtroom what he had told the corporal, that doing everything right was the only reason anyone could prove what had been done wrong, that the 2.3-second window existed on tape because he had narrated his own movements before making them, that the pattern in the filing record existed because 11 times, 14 words had been used against people who had no footage, no record, no way to contest what had been written. That documentation was not a shield, but its absence was a weapon, and it had been used as one. Before returning to his seat, he asked the judge one question. He asked how a county sheriff could be held to less accountability in a gas station parking lot than a soldier was required to maintain in a combat zone. The courtroom did not move. The jury deliberated for 19 hours across 2 days. The verdict came back on a Thursday, guilty on both counts. aggravated assault under color of law, deprivation of civil rights. The gallery did not celebrate. The silence held the silence of a room that understood this was not a finish line. Grimshaw was sentenced to 4 years in state custody. His peace officer license was permanently revoked in the state of Texas. He would not serve in law enforcement again. The civil judgment followed, $1.8 million total, $600,000 from Grimshaw personally, $1.2 million from Guadalupe County, the first time in the county's documented history that it had been held financially liable for the conduct of a sitting sheriff. The county commissioner issued a statement. It used the phrase, isolated incident. The civil rights firm in Austin released their own statement that same afternoon. It contained one sentence. The 6 prior complaints, the county legal memo, and the code yellow thread were attached as exhibits. Moses returned to active duty 9 months later. He did not seek recognition. He began speaking to JAG officers, to civil rights organizations, to groups of young men who asked him the same question the corporal had asked. He gave them the same answer every time. Document everything, not because the worst is guaranteed, because the people who wish you harm are already counting on you not to. Reuben Grimshaw entered state custody on a Wednesday. The facility had its own hierarchy, its own rules, its own procedures. 9 years as the highest authority in Guadalupe County meant nothing inside it. His body camera stayed in the county evidence locker, tagged, cataloged, time-stamped. Still, in a sense, producing the record that had ended his career, available to anyone with the standing to request it. Documentation does not forget. It does not flinch. It does not decide, in a 2.3-second window, what a man deserves. It records what happened, and it waits.
If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Share this video with someone who would appreciate it, and let's keep building this community together. And before you go, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what stood out to you the most. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next.